In 2022, there were approximately 824 murders in Canada and somewhere around 23,000 in the United States. Every day, people across both countries lose their lives, unexpectedly and in a violent manner. Yet, we only hear about a handful of them. Each victim has a family and friends that love and care for them. Each individual has left behind a gaping hole in their loved ones' lives. Yet, many of their names disappear as quickly as their last moments did, almost like they were invisible. No community is more aware of this lack of attention than the Indigenous community. It has become increasingly apparent that cases involving this community, especially Indigenous women, seem to be handled with less care, pushed to the bottom of the case files, and never considered important. So this episode is about highlighting another case that slipped through the cracks. It's about bringing to light the name of a beautiful woman whose life does matter and whose death left a giant hole in her family's hearts and in her community. We can't bring back Chelsea Poorman, but we can make sure that we do our due diligence in shining a light on her story. I'm Stephanie Moram, and this is Wicked Ever After. Please consider clicking the thumbs up button on this episode to get the story out. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel or podcast. If you're listening to my podcast and you want to see all my wild facial expressions, head over to YouTube. I really do appreciate all the support that you can offer. Like I've mentioned on many of my videos, I do have Invisalign, so if I mispronounce a word, I apologize in advance. Chelsea Poorman was born on October 12, 1995, and was a Cree woman from the Kawaktus First Nation in Saskatchewan. She grew up with her two sisters and her mom, Sheila Poorman. The podcast, True North True Crime, had the opportunity to interview Chelsea's mother, Sheila, and this is where I found a lot of the information describing her character. The family described Chelsea as being very organized and liking everything in its place. When she was just a young child, she started creating detailed to-do lists and continued this practice into adulthood. These lists and schedules were planned down to the last detail. For example, she would write 7 o'clock wake up, 7:15 take a shower, 7:30 brush your teeth, etc. She thoroughly prepared her outfits the night before, ensuring everything was ready for the next day. By the time she was 3, her family called her a little fashion queen because her outfits had to be matched perfectly before she would even leave the house. That sense of fashion also continued through adulthood. While Chelsea seemed to thrive with her lists and sense of control over her day-to-day, she was also a big nurturer and caregiver. She always stood up for her sisters when bullied and never let a stray animal get left behind. Her family described her as selfless, helpful, kind, sweet, and always anticipating others' needs and ensuring they had what they needed. As Chelsea got older, her dreams grew as well. She was drawn to creative activities, wanting to pursue a career in music writing and fashion design, and even thought about working in film at one point. At the core, she was creative and looked forward to expressing herself in those ways. In September of 2014, just before her 19th birthday, Chelsea was walking along the highway from a friend's place and was struck by a truck. This accident left her with serious life-altering physical and mental injuries. She suffered a fractured skull, a shattered arm, and 2 badly broken legs with 2 metal rods inserted. The doctors were convinced she would never walk again, but she did. Once she recovered, she had a permanent limp that required a leg brace and the use of a cane, and she wore a lifted shoe to remain mobile. Her arm was also seriously injured and was left at a permanent 90-degree angle, significantly impacting her day-to-day life. She also suffered from a serious brain injury, which went on to really impact her mental health. Due to her physical and mental injuries, Chelsea really started suffering. Also, due to her restrictions and mental health battles, returning to school or finding a job was very difficult. She seemed to be declining rapidly. However, she did graduate from Bishop Murray High School, and teachers presented her with a special award for overcoming tough obstacles to complete grade 12. It was a Perseverance Award, which Chelsea was always very proud of. Later, Chelsea turned to alcohol and drugs to cope and deal with the trauma. At this time, she was living in Saskatchewan and had difficulty getting help with her mental health issues. She knew she needed help, but had a hard time finding the resources and a place that would help her. Her sister Paige moved to Vancouver to be with their mother in July of 2020. Determined to get her life back on track, a month later, Chelsea joined them in Vancouver. Some reports say that Chelsea moved in with her boyfriend, and others don't even mention a boyfriend, so it's unclear if she had one or not. There's no mention anywhere that I read that a boyfriend was even interviewed after she went missing or was help in searching for Chelsea, so it's very unclear for me. She had plans to attend film school that fall. She had also connected with a clinic to start the journey of healing her mental health struggles and seemed to be getting back on a good path. On September 6th, when Chelsea was 24 years old, she went out for dinner and drinks with her sister Paige. That evening, Paige posted a picture of her and Chelsea at the restaurant on social media with the caption, "Hitting every club tonight in Granville." Both girls looked happy and looked like they were having a good time. Granville Strip is a 6-block area of bars, restaurants, nightclubs, and dollar pizza joints. There are usually many people around during the weekend, and right off of this strip, there are many apartments, condos, and a lot of residential space. After dinner, the girls went down the street and entered the Belmont Hotel, which housed 2 different bars. After a few drinks, they left the bar and walked to Paige's friend's apartment. It was only 2 blocks, but took them about 20 minutes to walk from the hotel to the apartment. The party at the apartment was a simple, casual hangout between friends. Allegedly, Chelsea was intoxicated and had an argument with her sister Paige. It was around midnight, and Paige reported that Chelsea just got up and left the apartment without telling anyone where she was going or if she was meeting anyone. It's like she just got up and vanished. Paige, feeling concerned, called Chelsea shortly after, and when she picked up, she said, "Leave me alone, I'm with my new bae." Paige asked, "Chelsea, where are you?" To which Chelsea never replied and instead hung up the phone. Side note, so with Chelsea saying "my new bae," it would make sense that she had a boyfriend because this is a new one, but again, it's really unclear to me. Now, even more concerned, Paige continued to call and text Chelsea, but received no answer. She also went out into the streets and walked up and down looking for signs of Chelsea, but didn't find any. They last spoke around 12:57 a.m., according to her sister. Paige and Sheila being Chelsea's mom, were texting and calling Chelsea, and they were met with no response. And Chelsea never checked in with them, which for them was highly unusual because the family reported that even when Chelsea had gone on drug and alcohol binges, she would always check in with them anyways. Sheila also noticed that Chelsea hadn't used her credit card, which was highly suspicious. So armed with this information and a sinking feeling in her gut, the family reported Chelsea missing 2 days later on September 8th of 2020. The Vancouver Police Department issued a public notice about Chelsea's disappearance 10 days later. Her family was super confused as to why the police waited 10 days, 10 whole days, because her mental health, disability, and Indigenous identity should have been enough for the officers to act fast and let the public know that she was missing. The police did begin combing the downtown area for signs of Chelsea and clues to where she might be. At the same time, they were trying to put pieces together for who this bae might have been. When Sheila and Paige were asked about bae, they said they had no idea who it would be. Chelsea was friendly and talked to anyone, so this Bay person could have really been anybody. According to the family, Chelsea wasn't dating anyone then, which is weird because some reports, like I mentioned, indicated she had a boyfriend. They also mentioned that Chelsea never said that she intended to meet up with someone that night before leaving the apartment, so hence this mystery man or this mystery person remains just that, a mystery. As the investigation continued, a cell phone ping was noted for the night Chelsea went missing from Victoria Square around 1 a.m. For those not familiar with that area, Victoria Square borders the western side of Vancouver's downtown east side and is about a 22-minute walk from Granville Strip. The east side is a neighborhood that struggles with many social economic issues, including addiction, mental health, and poverty. This cell phone ping obviously sent out alarm bells that Chelsea was in this area in the middle of the night, considering her mobility issues and inability to drive. The looming questions about how Chelsea got to this area began. Chelsea's mom, Sheila, spent weeks searching for her with the help of the community and organizations like Butterflies and Spirit. She spent her days handing out contact cards, chasing random tips, and keeping Chelsea's name in the media, giving interview after interview. Multiple vigils and marches were held for Chelsea to keep her face fresh on everyone's mind. Chelsea's dad, Michael Kiernan, who was divorced from Sheila then, drove around in his van covered in Chelsea's missing poster. Michael did this for months while living in his van, hoping someone knew where she was. The December after Chelsea went missing, Sergeant Steve Addison said that Chelsea's case was being transferred to the homicide department because she was a vulnerable person, which required additional resources. He was quick to clarify, though, that it was not being considered a homicide. After the transfer, detectives got approval for using tidal mapping in the Falls Creek area near Canby Street Bridge. The theory was that Chelsea may have unalived herself on or near the bridge. Despite efforts to search this area, no evidence supported this theory. The investigation seemed to stall at this point with no new leads. Family and friends continued with their own searches and doing everything they could to find Chelsea. Hope continued to burn that they would soon be reunited with their daughter and sister. Still, that hope was tragically vanquished on April 22nd, 2022, when Chelsea Poorman's body was found on the property of a vacant mansion in one of Vancouver's most expensive and elite neighborhoods. Clearly, the family was devastated and the community mourned. Chelsea had died at the young age of 24. May 5th is National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And the day after, on May 6th, 2 weeks after Chelsea's body was found, her family was informed her body was discovered. Sergeant Steve Addison of the Vancouver Police Department held a press conference to update the media, and this is what he had to say. I'm going to read it word for word. This morning, investigators for the Vancouver Police Department sadly had to inform the family that Chelsea's remains were found 2 weeks ago on a property in the west side of Vancouver. This is a tragic end to a high-profile missing persons case that started in September of 2020 when Chelsea went missing. Obviously, this is not the outcome that anybody wanted. We had always hoped that our investigation would lead to Chelsea's safe return. Our sympathies go out to everyone who knew Chelsea, who loved her, including her family, the community, and everyone who had hoped that she would come home safely. Chelsea was discovered on a vacant property near Granville and West 37th Avenue in Shaughnessy. She was discovered by a contractor who was working on the house, and the Vancouver Police Department was immediately notified. Investigators notified the British Columbia coroner who had assisted in the investigation, and we've now received the findings of that investigation. Based on those findings, it is confirmed that the remains recovered were that of Chelsea Poorman. We have also concluded, based on the totality of the evidence and everything that we know from the start of this investigation up until this time, and based on the findings, we don't believe that this death is suspicious. When I say that, what I mean is we do not believe that Chelsea was murdered or that it was caused by another person. The exact cause of death may never be known, but at this point, it's considered to be undetermined. We do believe that Chelsea likely died on that property either the night that she went missing or shortly thereafter, and her body remained on that property until discovered by the contractor working on the home. This whole case is very tragic, and like I said, not the outcome any of us wanted. Our sympathies go out to everyone. We all wanted this to end differently, and we are all very sorry that it didn't. As you can imagine, the determination that her death was not suspicious and not caused by another person sent shockwaves through the community. People were angered by how the investigation was handled. The family and community didn't buy that her death wasn't suspicious, and I'm going to explain some of those reasons. In the press conference, the sergeant said that Chelsea died on the property the night she went missing, or close to that time. So let's start with the location. The location was the first red flag in this case for me. The area where Chelsea's body was found was one of the most upscale and elite neighborhoods in Vancouver, called Shaughnessy. This street has many old and newer mansions priced in the millions. The appeal is that this neighborhood is very much part of the city itself, yet is a completely different world than the parts of the city where most struggle to pay the rent. It's truly an area for the 1%. However, what makes this more interesting is that while most of the homes are owned, several aren't lived in. They just sit vacant, like the home Chelsea was found at. She was found at a 5,570 square foot home located at 1436 West 36th Avenue. It is considered a single family home with 9 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. In 2014, it was bought for $7.3 million, but in 2019, it was assessed at $7.8 million. It is believed that the home has not been lived in since 2015, and the property records indicate the owners are a businessman and a homemaker who now live overseas. The house itself is surrounded by a metal fence that sits atop a brick base, and on the house side, there is a 6-foot hedge with a shorter hedge on the street side of the fence. The house sits behind a locked gate which looks to be about 6 feet tall. Apparently, the owners have been trying to renovate the house for many years, but have struggled to get the right permits for various reasons. Multiple building permits have been issued at the residence for the last 7 years, but the work seems sporadic. The front of the house was well maintained, but the back of the house resembled more of a construction site than a multi-million-dollar home. It was messy, with broken patio tiles, construction materials, and leftover paraphernalia. According to neighbors, people who didn't own the home were often seen entering and leaving the property, but no one knew who they were. So speaking of permits, here's a picture from the City of Vancouver records for the building permits that show all through 2021, this house was being actively renovated or at least had the required permits to do so. According to the independent contractor, they worked on this home from when they got the permit to when they stopped working on it after discovering Chelsea's remains. Chelsea's dad spoke to the contractor who found her body, and here's what he had to say about the discovery. We were just going around the property in the midday, just cleaning up, and we were like, holy crap, look. And we stopped and left the property gates and called the police. We were working a lot on this property, and there is no way anyone would have gotten this past us. So it would have had to have happened the night before, and we just didn't find it until now because we didn't check that area earlier. So this brings us back to the police saying they are confident Chelsea died where she was found and died around the time she went missing. So explain to me how no one ever saw her body if it was there for 20 months. And the people were working on the property. Chelsea's dad believes her body was dumped on the property, as I do. So this is The first of the pieces that makes it somewhat difficult to believe that another person wasn't involved. Here's another photo. It's a drone photo of the property and the patio where Chelsea's body was supposed to be for 20 months. You can also see that the date is September 21st, 2021, a year after she went missing. I mean, it's a little bit hard to see, but I don't see an outline or bones or any sort of body. I don't know what you think, but take a look at the picture. So that's all about the house. Let's return to Victoria Square's last known cell phone ping. From there to the house, it's about 7 kilometers, a 14-minute drive, a 37-minute bus ride, or about an hour and 33-minute walk. Remember, Chelsea has pretty significant mobility issues and isn't driving, so that would be a major walk for her to do by herself. If we measure the distance from the apartment to where she was last seen, the distance is 5.8 kilometers, a 12-mile drive, a 28-minute bus ride, or an hour and 16-minute walk. It was another very long walk, so that probably didn't happen. Also, Chelsea didn't use her credit card, so it's unlikely she purchased a bus ticket. Maybe she paid cash, got a cab, got an Uber, somebody else drove her, the person that murdered her perhaps. When Sheila asked if Chelsea knew about the house location, her mom said no. She was still pretty new to the area and was only familiar with the area around where she lived. Chelsea couldn't have walked there based on her disability. She doesn't walk long distances. She didn't know anyone in the city, but Chelsea's very friendly and could have been talking to anyone. So, based on where Chelsea was last seen and where her body was found, this is the second of the pieces that makes it somewhat difficult to believe that another person wasn't involved. We will now discuss her skeletal remains and other suspicions surrounding this case. Remember that Chelsea's remains were found in the backyard that resembled a construction site. A video of her father shows the location of the remains and how she was found along the fence line near a tiled granite or concrete patio space. This particular video is from Mark over at Vancouver True Crime Podcast, and I was given permission to share it. So let's take a couple of seconds to watch this video.
I'm going to jump the fence here right away, but this is the house. This is Chelsea's final spot. I don't see any evidence of cops besides leaving this shit all over the place, like these gloves and stuff. Mitts, if that's theirs, I don't know.
So this isn't a raised patio or deck. It's more like a garden patio. Chelsea's remains were completely skeletal when they were found, so they completely decomposed. The coroner's report determined that she died on September 7th, 2020 at the mansion itself. That means that her body had been out in the elements for 20 months, untouched and decomposing. Vancouver had been experiencing record-breaking severe weather, including heat waves, floods, snowstorms, which made it impossible to determine the cause of death because the remains were so deteriorated. The worst thing is that no one smelled anything if she was there for 20 months. I don't understand how no one smelled anything. As my kids would say, this is very sus. Very sus. In a press conference, Sergeant Steve Addison stated that we will likely never know the exact cause of death. Let me get this straight. They will likely never know the cause of death, but they can say with 100% certainty it was not suspicious. That is also suspicious to me. Chelsea's mom, Sheila, was not buying any of the no one else was involved nonsense. Police had told her that Chelsea was missing multiple finger bones and a piece of her skull was also missing. She said she was also told that her body was found with her clothing, but no personal items. She also said police didn't tell her whether her cell phone, leg brace, or cane were found with her body or at the residence. It didn't seem like she was actually being told anything, which was very frustrating for her mother. As the nature of these things go, so much misinformation and confusion started happening. It was almost like a game of telephone. At first, it was reported that Chelsea had been wrapped in a blanket. Then it was reported that there was a blanket and a cushion flung nearby. But Sheila said she was told that Chelsea was not wrapped in a blanket, but a blanket was nearby. And Sheila didn't appear to be the only one that was getting sporadic information. Chelsea's father, Michael, the man who had been living in his van for 12 months, driving around with Chelsea's posters on it, he did an Instagram live interview with podcast host Mark from Vancouver True Crime. Mike said that when he spoke to the coroner's office, he was told that Chelsea's entire skull was missing, except for her lower jawbone. So what was it? Part of her skull was missing or all of it? I don't know how this distinction is messed up. Either it was all missing or part of it was missing. It was also noted that her ID, camera, and bag were missing, as well as her cranium, like I mentioned. It really doesn't get more suspicious than this, in my opinion. Police continued to throw out the idea that Chelsea had overdosed, yet there was no drug paraphernalia found, which, okay, maybe it's been a long time and it's gone, but I mean, it's also odd that Chelsea's ID, camera, and bags were never found. Why would those things be missing? Why would she have gotten rid of them before overdosing? Like, it doesn't make any logical sense at all. And it also wasn't making any logical sense to her father, Michael, as well. On May 17th, 2022, Chelsea's dad, Michael, spoke to CBC News and revealed some interesting things. So here are some things to note from this article. First, Michael revealed that he broke into the Shaughnessy home on May 11th and May 12th after the police investigators had left. He was shocked to find several of Chelsea's personal items still on the back patio, where her body was found, including part of her cell phone case, socks, a bus pass, hair elastics, and what he called a disgusting number of police gloves thrown around. Here's another video of Chelsea's dad showing the items he mentioned above that he found. With his permission, this video was also taken from Mark at the Vancouver True Crime Instagram page.
So the white between the two candles, I've just learned that's where Chelsea was. But, this just doesn't look like, there's socks here, a hair elastic. There's just so much stuff here, untouched.
Isn't it kind of odd? Most crime scenes consist of investigators painstakingly bagging every scrap into plastic bags, taking numerous photos, and ensuring everything is collected for possible evidence. So why is a bunch of Chelsea stuff just left behind? It wasn't even bagged up to be returned to the family. Like, this is also just super weird. Michael also can't quite figure out how his disabled daughter got to the Shaughnessy house from 1278 Granville Street, where she was last seen. And what about those tall gates? How did she get over those? It's a 5.8 kilometers, and she would have had a hard time doing the 0.8 kilometers, let alone getting there and getting over those massive gates, her father said. It's basically impossible for her to have done that. Michael had never talked badly about the Vancouver Police Department or their investigation, instead allowing them space and time to conduct a thorough investigation. However, his frustration began to show in this interview. He believed a lack of urgency by the Vancouver Police Department meant valuable information was lost. He said not only was there a 10-day delay in issuing a missing persons notice to the public, but the police were untruthful about their efforts to collect video coverage from the night of her disappearance from stores around Granville Street. Chelsea's dad spoke to quite a few business owners and was told they were never approached or asked about Chelsea or a video. Allegedly, the police never checked the cameras but claimed they did an extensive video search. Michael said, nothing but lies, and I can verify that. Something that seemed to add insult to injury was when Michael learned that police didn't even have video from their own surveillance cameras at the Vancouver Police Department Granville Police Station, which just happened to point at the building where Chelsea was last seen alive. Apparently, the cameras weren't working that night. Here we go again. We have a broken camera that could have potentially provided evidence to the police, and it's their own camera that's not working. It's so frustrating. Fix your cameras, people. Fix your cameras. Michael criticized the police when he found Chelsea's missing persons poster taken down and replaced with one advertising $20 Vancouver Police Department sunglasses. A worker told him it was done by the order of the higher-ups. Chelsea's dad asked officers, "Where the hell is Chelsea's poster?" They said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. We'll get one back up there for you." So weird. Michael went on to say there was a lot of confusing communication from the investigators after Chelsea's remains were found. He was told by police she was discovered in a rubbish pile. Then he was told she was found lying on a cushion with a blanket over her. He said it was only after speaking directly with the contractor who discovered her body that he learned neither were true, that she was found lying on the house's back patio. Seems like both parents were getting very confusing information. Chelsea's dad also can't help but wonder if the Vancouver Police Department would have taken Chelsea's disappearance more seriously and acted more quickly if she wasn't Indigenous. I believe they have an issue with Indigenous women, 100%. I believe this because she was Indigenous and she didn't get the proper service that she deserved. Gonna throw that out there. If she had blonde hair and blue eyes, I'm pretty sure the police department would have acted a little bit quicker on this. That's my thoughts. The Vancouver Police Department responded to Michael's claim. Sergeant Steve Addison stated, "The Vancouver Police Department carried out a detailed and complex investigation into Chelsea's disappearance that started the day she was reported missing. Provincial policing standards under which the Vancouver Police Department operates states that when it comes to missing persons, Aboriginal women and girls are at an increased risk of harm and disproportionately represented among missing and murdered women throughout Canada. Outlined in this guideline, this must be considered when determining the appropriate response and resources needed, which were all developed out of the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry that found blatant failures of police in investigating the serial murder of women, many of them Indigenous, by Robert Pickton." Remember that name. He is a monster. He is a horrible human being, and I will be doing 1 or 2 episodes about him. A lot of research is involved, but just keep that name at the back of your head. Former Vancouver Police Department Constable Dave Dickens, who now works as an outreach worker for the Lookout Emergency Aid Society, was instrumental in connecting Pickton to the Vancouver women who went missing in the 1990s, believing there's still police bias when it comes to investigating missing Indigenous women. Michael remains convicted that the Vancouver Police Department failed his daughter. My message to the police is do your job. On May 17th, 2022, Sergeant Steve Addison said that the case had remained open, but there wasn't significant evidence to point to a crime. In a recent communication, Sergeant Steve Addison wrote that no decisions were made in haste. "Our findings are based on facts and evidence. We understand that these findings are unlikely to satisfy the family, friends, and community members who love Chelsea and believe her death must be part of a crime. We don't know yet how Chelsea died or how she ended up in the house in Shaughnessy. We urge anyone who has information to come forward." Again, how can they say it wasn't a homicide if they don't know how she died? I don't understand. Sheila told reporters, They say that it's still an ongoing investigation, but they're backpedaling. They told me Friday that they're still investigating and they were likely to apologize, but the damage is already done. It wasn't right. They just dismissed Chelsea just like that on national television, like she was nothing. Like, that's it. We are done. Let's wash our hands of her. And they expect me to just accept it like that. Like, no, I can't do that. When asked what she would like to see happen going forward, Sheila said, I want them to keep investigating. I want the police to publicly apologize for the way they handled the case and for them to say they're going to continue with the investigation publicly. An apology behind closed doors is unacceptable for Sheila. A few days before Chelsea was laid to rest, family and community members gathered in Vancouver to honor Chelsea at the mansion where her remains were found. Many participants dressed in red and hung red posters of Chelsea. They said prayers, sang, and drummed while taking part in a ceremony. Advocates for the Indigenous community said prayers for Chelsea while asking questions about her death. The memorial was organized by Butterflies and Spirit, the group that had been helping Chelsea's family from the very beginning, and whose main mission is to support families of murdered Indigenous women and girls. Chelsea was finally laid to rest on May 15th. A letter from the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations called for a full investigation into Chelsea's death. They stated, the Vancouver Police Department must do more to investigate what truly happened to Chelsea. Chelsea's family deserves to know the truth of what happened to their daughter and sister. It is our treaty and inherent right to be protected by police members across Canada, and this department has failed. The Vancouver Police Department must issue an apology to Chelsea's family. Then the real work has to begin. The person responsible for Chelsea's murder needs to be caught and justice needs to be served. Too many of our mothers, daughters, and sisters have been taken and murdered, and we've got no answers as to what happened. This needs to end. On May 18th, 2022, another march and vigil was held in downtown Vancouver. The march ended at the main mansion where Chelsea was found, and after the march was over and people were leaving, a man, a realtor, actually from the neighborhood, was seen tearing down posters pleading for information about Chelsea Poorman, a seemingly very cruel act. He was concerned with what those posters looked like on the poles in the community. He was later actually fired from the realtor company he was working for. We are left with so many questions in this case. Who is the person Chelsea left to see that she referred to as Bae? How did she get to Victory Square where her phone was pinged? How did she get to Shaughnessy, and why was there no phone pinged in that location? If her body was there for 20 months, where people were coming and going, allegedly, why did no one discover her body earlier? Was there no smell? Did the neighbors not notice anything? Where are the missing skeletal remains? Where the hell is her skull? If this was an overdose, who was she using with? Was she by herself? Where's her ID? How did she get over the fence, the locked fence at that, given her disabilities? Why was the Vancouver police so quick to call her death not suspicious when so many signs point to somebody being involved? I also wanted to add about Chelsea's remains. I've heard some theories that maybe animals took her skull or they chewed on the fingers. But my question is, if that was the case, why didn't they potentially take all the bones? I feel like animals would do that. And why weren't there bite marks where the fingers were chewed off? That's my question. It can be super frustrating to have so many open-ended questions that appear like they may never be answered. The family is left with more questions than answers, forced to live with a headache daily. In a previous episode where I shared the story of another Indigenous victim, Amber Tuckero, I shared some staggering stats with you, and I think it's worth repeating. According to the Assembly of First Nations website, Indigenous women are 4 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to be victims of violence. Indigenous women make up 16% of all female homicide victims and 11% of missing women. Yet, Indigenous people make up only 4.3% of the population of Canada. It's important to share this again because it's up to all of us to ensure that every victim gets a fair shot at justice, that every single beautiful soul whose life is taken under unknown circumstances is given the same respect and care as anyone else, despite their skin color, their heritage, their beliefs. We can all do our part to get involved, to volunteer, to make sure these stories never get cold, but are rather shared over and over again until we no longer have to talk about Indigenous women being ignored and their cases not being taken seriously. Chelsea suffered a lot of trauma in her life, but she remained kind, selfless, and the light of her family's life. In the comments, let me know your thoughts, theories, opinions on this case. Also, don't forget to share your case suggestions with me so I know what you want to hear about next. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're listening on. You can stay connected with me on Instagram and TikTok at This Is Stephanie Moran. Thank you so much for listening to Chelsea Poorman's story. Until next time, stay safe out there.